In this section of Crisis of Faith, we'll be looking at the scientific revolution and Enlightenment. The period from the 16th century through the 18th century saw a fundamental change in science and European thought, as many Europeans rejected the established dogmas or rigid beliefs in favor of rational investigation and reason. And the first area that we see this is in the unknown universe. For over a millennia, 1,000 years, Europeans accepted the Greeks' view of the universe, Greeks like Aristotle and Ptolemy. However, new revelations such as the Renaissance and the Age of Exploration, even the Reformation itself, challenged these views, forcing Europeans to re-examine everything they thought they knew. And this begins in 1542 with Nicholas Copernicus. What he does is replace the geocentric, this Earth-centered universe, with a heliocentric or sun-centered universe. For ages, many believed that the Earth stood still and everything revolved around the Earth, so everything was Earth-centered. But mathematically, looking at the objects in the night sky, that didn't really make sense. It didn't make mathematical sense or physical sense. So what he does is take the Earth out and place the sun at the center and make the Earth and everything else revolve around the sun. And not that that was perfect, but it made more sense mathematically. Now, of course, this works, but it's not perfect because nothing in our universe revolves just perfectly around an object. Even the planets around the sun is not perfect. And this is the work of Johannes Kepler. In 1609, he introduced the theory of elliptical orbits, or egg-like orbits, that the planets do revolve around the sun, but it's not a perfect circle. It's more of an elliptical, kind of stretched out oval-like orbit. And this explained a little bit better the movement of the Earth and the other planets around the sun. Now, Copernicus and Kepler revolutionized Europeans' views of the universe and their place in it with this heliocentric model with elliptical orbits of the planets around the sun. But it's the discovery of the next two men that will forever change Europe's understanding of the entire universe. One of those is Galileo Galilei. In 1610, he's the first to use the telescope to view the night sky, challenging age-old traditions and views of the universe. For one, he looked at the moon and realized it was an imperfect shape. Most people believe that it was a perfect round sphere like a marble, but it's not. It's got tons of craters and different little things going on there. It's not smooth. Secondly, he looks at Venus and realizes that Venus goes through phases. And what we mean by this is if you look at Venus through a telescope, sometimes you see all of Venus. Sometimes you see the left half. Sometimes you see the right half. Sometimes you don't see it at all when you think you should. And kind of like the moon, what this shows is that Venus is being blocked by different objects as it travels around the sun. That's why you only see half of it one time, because the sun is only shining on one half. Sometimes, from our perspective, the sun is shining on the entire side of it, so we can see all of it at one point. So this really helps confirm Copernicus and Kepler's view that we live in a heliocentric universe, or at least a heliocentric solar system. Now, he also introduces and confirms that weight isn't a factor in falling bodies. The story is that he went to the top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa, dropping feathers and cannonballs and different other objects, and realizing that, taking out wind resistance, everything falls the same, no matter what. So he's confirming that weight isn't a factor in falling bodies, something else that plays a big role in physics and our understanding of the universe. And of course, Galileo's work on the universe is challenged by the Catholic Church, putting him at one point on trial for heresy, forcing him to retract or take back his claims to avoid death. So there are infamous stories of Galileo coming into conflict with the Catholic Church in this battle over science versus religion. And our next guy is an English scientist, Isaac Newton, who in 1687 will greatly influence science through his works on gravitational force and the three laws of motion. Inertia, which is the tendency to be unchanged, that is, an object at rest will stay at rest unless acted upon by an outside force. An object in motion will stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. The second law, dealing with acceleration or the speed of moving objects, deals with the idea of force and that mass times acceleration will give you the force of an object. And finally, his third law, in that actions have equal and opposite reactions. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. But more than his work on gravitational force and his three laws of motion, Newton actually confirmed that regulated natural law was the basis of everything in the universe, providing that all things really happen for a reason, that it's not magic, it's not some supernatural force out there that's doing things. These are natural laws that govern everything in our universe. So the works of these men inspired others to go out and challenge traditional beliefs about everything and start to develop new approaches to understanding the natural world through overhauled tests and observations and rigorous mathematic explanations. These challenges symbolize a revolution of thought as science comes of age, ushering in what many call the scientific revolution. But, however, it's not just the universe that we're starting to delve into and understand better. We're starting to understand the body a little better now. For one, before the 1500s, we as humans knew very little about our own bodies, or even how they worked. But that all changes in 1543 with Andreas Vesalius, who expanded the knowledge of the human body by dissecting cadavers or corpses and describing the individual organs and how they worked. So he cut up the human body and started tinkering with different things and realizing, well, the lungs, that's what helps you breathe. The heart pumps your blood, actually, and just all the inner workings of the human body. And making very, very detailed descriptions and drawings that he put in these woodcut images that you see there on the right here of the human body. But it's not just the human body that we're starting to look at. In 1673, Antony von Leeuwenhoek used the newly invented microscope to make extensive observations of small organisms in pond water and even saliva in his own mouth, and started seeing bacteria and other living things kind of growing there that you can't see with the naked eye, opening up the world of microbiology. So really what these people are doing, these scientists, are challenging the traditional views of the world and looking at new approaches to understanding the world around them. This starts what we know as the scientific process. Now, at the heart of the scientific revolution was this systematic approach in which scientists studied and proved their findings using logical reasoning supported by facts to recreate their experiments and give evidence to what they were saying was in fact true. Now, this starts in 1620 with Francis Bacon. He developed the scientific method, which uses reason to collect data through observation and experimentation. He argued that knowledge was limitless, but man could benefit from exploring the unknown and thus improving his knowledge and better understanding the world he sought to improve. That if there was a method to collect data, to do observations and experimentations, we could discover a lot about the world around us and help to improve it, really. Another guy, René Descartes, in 1662, developed the ideas of rationalism, only accepting things that can be proven. But unlike Francis Bacon's scientific method, which looked for observation and experimentation, Descartes rejected observational experience in favor of just pure reason as a source of knowledge. That if you can reason something out, if it makes sense in the mind, then that is as good as fact. However, both of these men contributed to the scientific method, where solutions to problems are solved through either observational experiments, through the scientific method, or just deductive reasoning. But either way, they are rejecting traditional knowledge, much of which came from the church. So all of this comes together to spark off something called the scientific revolution. But there's another movement that takes off also during this time period, and that is the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was a philosophical movement emphasizing reason over tradition that challenged existing ideas like the monarchy, like nobility, and certain institutions like the church, while encouraging people to think critically about everything to help improve society. So, in this attempt to improve society, these enlightened thinkers of this time followed a very strict belief structure. One was that society could be improved through reason rather than faith and tradition, that using just pure intellect, reasoning things out that make sense, that can also be backed up through, I guess you can call it old Greek style Aristotle, Plato philosophy, that type of reason could help improve society better than faith or just doing it the way we've always done it, tradition. So this, of course, is a challenge to the church. Another part of their belief structure is this opposition to intolerance and superstition that came from religion, myth, or folklore. Superstitions like witchcraft or magic, things that you really couldn't prove necessarily. You couldn't recreate these in an experiment through the scientific method. You couldn't reason that these things actually happened as mankind is getting a lot more intellectual and a lot more intelligent, that these things cannot be proven, therefore we're going to oppose these things. But not only are they opposing superstition, but again, they're also opposing intolerance to other belief structures. A third point in their belief structure was the promotion of intellectual exchange and debates through books or salons. The people of the Enlightenment, at least these enlightened thinkers, loved to debate new ideas or at least talk about them in an open forum. Sometimes it was through writings that they would publish. Sometimes it was through these things called salons at the time, which were these academic parties where they came together to learn. So they would have these groups that would come together in a meeting place and discuss the new ideas of the day. Think of it like an early version of a TED Talk, where they would have guest speakers come in and talk about their ideas or the latest ideas, and they would discuss and debate them. A fourth thing is that nature functioned logically and reasonably. Therefore, in their mind, what was natural in society or in the world should be considered reasonable. And to take that a step further, if what was natural was reasonable, then shouldn't human law be made from natural law? That in the animal world, killing or stealing is wrong, therefore in the human world, that should be wrong. So they looked to nature to find what was considered natural in society. And one of the most influential thinkers of the Enlightenment was a guy named Voltaire, who lived from 1694 to 1778. Again, one of the most influential thinkers of the Enlightenment, known for championing personal freedoms and religious tolerance. He was a big supporter in separation of church and state, but also known for his criticisms of the French monarchy, the idea of nobility, and even the Catholic Church. But Voltaire was also a famous deist. And what deism is a religious belief that really pops up around this time that believed in God from reason, describing God like a clockmaker. And what is meant by that is they viewed God in the rationalistic way that there had to be a God. There had to be a supreme being who created all this stuff. But unlike the Judeo-Christian teachings of Jews and Christians, they did not view God in the way that the Bible taught, in that God interacted with his creation. So they viewed God like a clockmaker, in the sense that, like a clockmaker, God made the world, set it in motion, and then left. Kind of like a clockmaker can make a clock, wind it up, and then it runs itself. So their view, different from what the Catholic Church or any church was teaching at that time, was that God existed but did not interact with his creation. This is what we call deism. And the next guy here, in 1772, does one of the greatest achievements of the Enlightenment when he completes and publishes the Encyclopedia, which helps spread enlightened ideas and attempts to really secularize education, attacking religious dogma and superstitions. So he publishes an encyclopedia. For those of you that don't know what an encyclopedia is, think of it like Wikipedia in print form. And what this does is challenges the church's teachings on a lot of different things, because what was in the encyclopedia was scientific stuff, things that could be proven or could be studied and rationalized in this enlightened manner. So anything that was based solely on faith or things that could not be proven weren't included, or at least weren't put in there as if they were fact. So this is really starting to spread this enlightened idea that all of mankind's information, what mankind at this point had accrued as far as knowledge, would be put into an encyclopedia and printed in such a way that anybody could read it, understand it, and really starts to help educate the world, at least Europe in this case, in these enlightened ideas and help spread them. And this is where we get into social sciences, where enlightened thinkers attempted to improve society by turning to politics and the government that were charged with organizing and helping to regulate human activity. So with new and fresh understandings about how societies work, these enlightened thinkers began to search for understanding how governments worked and how they should work. Starting with Thomas Hobbes, who lives from 1694 to 1778, he is a philosopher who introduced the idea of a social contract in which people give up their power, their freedoms, and their rights to a government in exchange for order and security. I will be, for example, a Roman or French or German citizen. I will abide by their laws. I will give up some of my power. I'll give up some of my freedom and some of my rights as a person in exchange for you maintaining law and order and making me feel safe. That if someone attacks me, then yes, the army is going to protect me. My tax dollars went to help fund that and pay for that. So I might have to go and fight in that army. I may have to work for the government to help provide for that army. So I'm giving up my power, my rights, and in some cases maybe even a little bit of freedom in exchange for that security. So this is the idea of the social contract, that all people in societies have kind of a social contract set up with their government. You give me order and security, I will give up a little bit of my power, freedom, and rights so you can do that. And so what this really does is establish a very delicate balance between freedom and security, as one must be given up to achieve the other. So if you want total security, you can go somewhere like prison or jail, especially if you're in solitary confinement where you're by yourself. Nothing's going to bother you or touch you, so you have complete security, yet you have no freedom. But if you have complete freedom, you're a wild man living in the woods, yes, you're free to do whatever you want to, but you lack a lot of security and a lot of help that would come with an established government or order. So the problem with society is finding where's that happy median, where's that balance where I have enough freedom that I feel free, yet I have enough security to feel safe. So it's that delicate balance that all governments, even today, kind of tinker with and try to find that happy median. The next guy here, John Locke, probably does more than any of the rest of them in establishing principles that most of the Western world follows today, especially America. He lives from 1632 to 1704. He is an English philosopher who introduces theories that revolutionized the political world. For one, the blank canvas mind theory. This idea that people are born equal, this blank canvas, and they are molded by their environments and their experiences, so that no one is born special in his mind. We're all born equal. Doesn't matter if you're a peasant or you're a king. We're all birthed the same way. We all come out the same way. But it's your environment and your experiences that will determine your life. If you take a peasant baby, a poor person's baby, and put them in the home of the king and raise them as a prince, he will go on thinking he's a prince and live as a prince. If you take a young prince as a baby and put him in the home of a peasant, he will be raised as a peasant and will experience things as a peasant and will go on living as a peasant. There's nothing special about anybody. It's your environments and your experiences that make you who you are. To take that a step further, if you're exposed to the right environments and the right influences, you could, in fact, create a better society. So this is where ideas of compulsory education, that if we sent every child to school, then everyone would be educated, everyone would have the same environmental and experimental upbringing, all be taught the same kind of things. Therefore, you could have a better society if you gave them the right teachings and the right environment to grow up in. It's the difference of having paid education. Therefore, only the rich would go to school and the poor couldn't. So you have two different experiences. The poor who never goes to school and the rich that can afford to go to school. So if you make that equal and expose everyone to the right environments and influences, as a whole, you would create a better society. John Locke also develops his ideas of what are natural rights. Remember earlier we talked about what was found in nature should be what's found in human law. What are natural rights should be human rights. Here he states that life, liberty, and property are natural rights. These are things that humans have naturally. You have the right to live, you have the right to be free, and you have the right to own things. And that it's the government's job to maintain those rights. Thirdly, his idea of the right to rebel, that people have the right to rebel against, remove, and even alter their government if that said government fails to maintain and protect those rights. These are all core beliefs that you will find in the birth of the American Revolution that comes about a half century after he dies. So a lot of these ideas that John Locke will establish will go on to influence the Western world, especially America. The next guy we see here, Baron de Montesquieu, the Baron of Montesquieu, living from 1689 to 1755, introduced the theory of the separation of powers into what we call branches, the legislative, executive, and judicial. The legislative making the laws, the executive carrying out the laws, and the judicial judging and interpreting the laws, or applying the law. This is where government power is divided, ensuring that no one person or group has too much power, establishing a set of checks and balances on each of the branches that limits and controls each other. So you don't have, say, an absolute monarch who is judge, jury, and executioner. He can make the laws, carry out the laws, and judge if you're breaking the laws. So the idea that if you separate those powers into three distinct groups, that makes things a lot better and ensures that no one group has too much power. And so what this kind of looks like is, in most of history up until this point, you had the ruler on top and the people below. The ruler is on top, he's in charge, and the people are below. There's less rulers or less people at the top controlling things. The people are on the bottom just kind of having to take it and just listen to what the ruler says. His idea is going to flip that and say that, no, the people are in charge, the people should be on top, and the ruler should be on the bottom. That the people should be in charge and the rulers obey with the will of the people. So through the ideas of Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and now the Baron de Montesquieu, this is the way that society is going to start to turn. This is a turning point in world history that we see from the dawn of man almost up until this time, ruler on top, people below having to obey the king, the emperor, whomever, to this shift as we saw in the Glorious Revolution, at least in England, where no, it's the people, or in that case Parliament, that's in charge, and the ruler obeys the will of the people. This is a definite shift in the world and society, especially in matters of politics. Now, to take this a step further, I'm going to point out a couple of key things here that each of these men believed that will go on to influence the creation of America, and a very, very important document that all of you know, the Declaration of Independence. Take, for example, this phrase here, the people are born equal. All people are born equal. You will find that here in the preamble of the Declaration of Independence, the first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence. Right there it is. All men are created equal. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Right there in the Declaration of Independence. Now, going back to another one here. Life, liberty, and property. Those three words, those natural rights that are the government's job to maintain. Here you find it again. These unalienable rights, these unforeign rights, these natural rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Change from the word property to pursuit of happiness there. Also, the right to rebel, that people have the right to rebel against, remove, and alter their government if that government fails to maintain and protect their rights. Again, back to the Declaration, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends. These ends meaning these rights here, to secure your rights. It is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. So this is the catalyst that kind of starts the Declaration of Independence off to the American Revolution, that we're going to rebel against England, against Britain, and institute a new government. Where do these ideas come from? They're coming from these men, Hobbes, Locke, and to some degree afterwards, Montesquieu. So these enlightened thinkers will go on to definitely influence European and world history, but you can definitely see the link there between these men and their ideas here a half a century before the Declaration of Independence is written there in 1776. And to take it a little further here with Jean-René Rousseau, he's echoing Hobbes' social contract theory, stating that individuals in society should make laws they were to be governed by. That if the people are going to give up certain freedoms and certain rights to the government to secure them and to protect them, that those same individuals in society should be the ones that make the laws that they're going to be governed by. And again, you can find this phrase, the individuals in society should make laws, also in the Declaration of Independence, right there. That to secure these rights, these natural rights, governments are instituted among men. Essentially, governments are made by the people. And the governments get their power, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Essentially what that's saying is governments get their power from the people, the will or consent, the say-so of the people. Lastly, you have Adam Smith, who from 1723 to 1790 writes a book called The Wealth of Nations. And so what he believes in is something called laissez-faire economics, or free market economics. Laissez-faire meaning hands-off, or in this case, no state regulation, where economics would be controlled by individuals that would meet the demands of the population to satisfy their own interest, establishing the concept of capitalism. So this is where you start to see this divide in economics between mercantilism and the free market. Mercantilism, where you have government-controlled economics, as we said back during the Age of Exploration, the country of Spain or France or Britain would control the economy. We need you to grow cotton for us or grow sugar for us because it will benefit the state. So state control there. Here's the exact opposite. No state control. Let the people, the individuals, meet the demands. If people want sugar, an individual who wants to make money will grow sugar and meet that demand. If someone needs, chairs, someone's going to go find the wood and make chairs to make some money for themselves, to satisfy their own interests, but also meet the demands of the public. If no one is interested in buying tobacco, then no one's going to be out there trying to grow tobacco. So let individuals decide what suits their interest, and they will meet the demands of the market. Adam Smith was also a big proponent of the division of labor, that to increase production speed, you needed to divide out the labor into multiple simplistic steps. It's the difference in having one person sit there and fold a very complex origami duck, and then having a whole classroom full of people sitting there doing one step. One person folds the paper in half, passes it on to the next person who does another fold. Doing that, you could very, very quickly get a ton of origami ducks made. If one person has one step, that's what they do. So the first person takes a sheet of paper, folds it in half, passes it on. Gets another one, folds it in half, passes it on. Those simplistic steps will get the job done a whole lot faster by dividing out that labor, and therefore will increase your production speed. That's why in modern times we have things like the moving assembly line, because it divides labor out and increases production speed. Finally, in the end, the Enlightenment ideas spread across Europe through things like newspapers, journals, those salons we talked about, as the sources of information were more accessible to a very increasingly literate population. These ideas would spark revolutions over the next century, fundamentally changing the political and the social structure of Western civilization from Europe to the Americas.